Welcome to the Motivation Lab episode 8. Here's the banner headline for today, right? So less than 20% of people actually write down their goals vividly enough for it to make a difference in their goal achievement. That's number one. Number two is a statistic you've probably heard me cite before, but if you haven't, it is actually included in a 2016 article in Inc. magazine, and I think it was based on a study that was done in 2015 that said that less than 10% of people who created New Year's resolutions actually achieved them, was actually 8% achieved them. So if you join those two data points or insights, that probably is not too shocking. But here's what may be surprising to you. Now, number one, the type of people who actually would watch this kind of information are maybe surprised because you probably have written them down. But the question for you is, have you updated them? Have you written them down again over time? So at around the age of 25, I wrote down my goals for what I viewed as probably the next 30 years, right? And by the way, I achieved a lot of those. I haven't achieved all of them, but I achieved a lot of those goals. What I did not understand at the time, and what you may not understand except intuitively, is that there are two principles that are at work in terms of helping you do this. So one of them is called encoding. So when you actually write down your goals, you are encoding them in your long-term memory. That's important, obviously, because it keeps it front and center in your mind. It is something that you can access. It is something you remember, and your brain will organize activities around hitting goals that are in front of you, right? In fact, there was a study of MS patients, so those with multiple sclerosis, and it was interesting. So the people who wrote down their goals did much better than the people who had not written down their goals. And the other thing that was fascinating about this by neuroscientists was that that group, the control group, the brain actually minimized the difficulty or challenges associated with the goals. And the goals, by the way, were about ameliorating or making better their symptoms, right? But the brain made the challenge less daunting, which gave them more confidence to go after it. So think about goals that you have that you may think are too daunting. If the act of actually writing them down helps your brain create or minimize the difficulty, that is potentially a huge thing for you, right? The other thing is called the generation effect. So the generation effect is not about families and generations. What it is about the act of creating the goals yourself, right? And so that generation effect makes it even more powerful because now you are much more invested in the process itself. So you have encoding, you have the generation effect, and what you also have, if you do this right, you can create a visual which is going to become a cue for you over time. So the Motivation Lab episode 8 question for you is, are you really writing down your goals? Number one, have you updated your goals? Because your goals can be updated throughout the entirety of your life. I am as guilty of this as anybody. In a work setting, this takes place almost automatically every single year. People get in the habit of creating their goals, and if they're really good at it, they'll revise them quarterly, for example, or even monthly, depending. You don't want to create a mania around this, but the reality is that you want to update them appropriately. Beyond that, though, if you do work in an organization, think about the power of your associates writing down their own goals. Don't get into the issue of whether or not they're going to write down too easy goals or whatever. That's not the point. The point is how you create a really invested organization by using these principles. And I have done this with my teams for years. And from my perspective and my experience, it makes a gigantic difference. So the homework for you today is, number one, answer the question. Are you writing down your goals in a meaningfully enough way so that they are helpful to you in achieving your goals? And number two, why don't you create a little experiment for yourself? And if you have a short-term goal that you can reach in, say, 6 weeks, write it down and then follow a process to make sure that you keep it front and center and you attack it with the right plan. Now, I have something called the Goalverse that you can check out if you want to. That's going to be in the write-up. If you subscribe to these, you will get a chance to see that and links to the other articles that I am mentioning today. Welcome to the Motivation Lab. Thank you so much for stopping by.